Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jane Harman, recovering politician and president and CEO of the Wilson Center, where we are proud to co-sponsor today's third annual Hack the Capitol event. I personally attended, not virtually, the last two hacks and watched ICS Village experts demonstrate things like how PLCs or programmable logic controllers work, and learned what sniffing industrial traffic means. It does sound kind of weird, but I did learn this. Of course, the graduates of the Wilson Center's technology labs, congressional staff, many of whom participated today, all know all these words. And if anyone can pull off virtual events while still keeping it fun and interesting, it's the hacker community. I'm told the panels today have been fascinating, filled with discussion about the evolution of cyber threats, possible solutions, and how to craft policies flexible enough to allow new technology developments. We're lucky, very, to cap this day with comments from former Governor, present Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire. Senator Hassan is a member of the House Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, where she has spent considerable time trying to help states navigate difficult cyber challenges, and work with my friend Senator Rob Portman to introduce the Hack DHS Act, a bug bounty pilot program. Love that, a bug bounty pilot program where ethical hackers, let's understand, most hackers are ethical, search for vulnerabilities in the Department of Homeland Security networks. And that bill, bipartisan bill, imagine, bipartisan bill, became law last year. Maggie's no stranger to cybersecurity policy. As governor of New Hampshire, she established the Granite State Cybersecurity Integration Center to coordinate cybersecurity monitoring, information sharing, threat analysis, situational awareness, and did this by executive order. Really impressive. Everyone knows that Congress is riven, sadly now, with toxic partisanship. But there are a few members, and I mentioned Maggie, and I also mentioned Rob Portman, whom I met in another lifetime when we practiced law together. Imagine that, before either of us was in politics. But there are members who try to make the place work and who understand that they're there to solve problems for the American people, and not just to seek political advantage for their party. And one of them, for sure, is Senator Hassan. And I am absolutely thrilled that she agreed to be part of this. And we're in for a treat, and I'm in for a treat because I'm going to listen to this. And I'm glad we can hear her. And, good luck, Maggie, with everything. You have a huge fan club downtown, certainly including me. Please welcome Senator Hassan.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Harman, for that introduction, but also for your leadership of the Wilson Center. I am incredibly grateful to you. I'm delighted to be joining this event. And it's really fun to know that this is now the Wilson Center's third Hack the Capitol event. We are in Hack the Capitol 3.0. And before I go on, I am getting a little bit of echo, which I can deal with, but is the audio okay with everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. While COVID-19 has prevented us from gathering in person this year, this virtual event is a reminder of the challenges that we all have ahead of us. As a result of this pandemic, more and more of our daily lives have moved online. And as our reliance on the internet for services like telehealth, work, and education grows, the possibility that cyber attacks will wreak havoc on our economy and our society grows as well. As a member of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, ensuring that our nation is safe, secure, and free is my top priority. And improving cybersecurity in particular is increasingly critical to those efforts. I'm trying to do just that, and today I want to discuss the nature of the challenge, measures that Congress has taken to bolster cybersecurity, and what additional efforts we should be taking to increase our capacity to respond to threats and vulnerabilities. Throughout American history, Nation states wielding armies and weapons that we could see and track pose the greatest security threats to our country. Those threats have not dissipated, to be sure, but they have been joined by an array of increasingly complex and evasive security challenges, especially with regard to cyber attacks. Countries including China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea have engaged in complex cyber attacks, espionage, and influence campaigns against our government and the American people. These nations and other hostile actors have the capacity to cause significant harm in our society and disrupt the functions of our financial, manufacturing, defense, healthcare, communications, and education infrastructure without even firing a shot. Russia has targeted our critical infrastructure, attempting to infiltrate our power grid, nuclear facilities, water and aviation sectors, and more. We also know that Russia remains a threat to our election security and infrastructure following their interference in the 2016 election. Bad actors have targeted and continue to target our businesses and communities. And these threats have heightened the very real concerns that virtual attacks could not just cause massive disruptions, but could actually cause physical harm too. We saw this in 2017 when a hostile actor infected computer systems in more than 150 countries. This attack impacted computer systems in the United Kingdom's National Health Service, knocking out vital services and putting people's health at risk. In the midst of a global pandemic, these types of threats pose an even more dire threat. According to a report by Interpol, there has been a global increase in ransomware attempts against hospitals and healthcare organizations during this pandemic. And in May, CISA released a joint alert with the United Kingdom warning that advanced persistent threat groups were exploiting the pandemic as part of their cyber operations, including targeting healthcare and research organizations. With hospitals already overwhelmed with patients and an increase in patients accessing telehealth services, a significant attack could have devastating consequences on the care that our people need. In addition, we've seen an uptick in threats to our education system. With a greater reliance on remote learning or a combination of remote and in-person learning, schools have become a target of hackers, which threaten to lock out students and teachers from the computer networks that they need. Last week in Connecticut, the Hartford School District was forced to delay its first day of school as a result of a ransomware attack. And just this week in Virginia, the Fairfax County Public Schools announced that they had suffered a ransomware attack with hackers threatening to release personal information about students. During this pandemic and beyond, it is clear that we need to both significantly improve the cyber resiliency of our communities through dedicated resources and funding, and also to adopt better strategy for how we respond to and deter these threats. The Department of Homeland Security must continue to play a central role in coordinating America's cybersecurity efforts. That means working with the financial, energy, telecommunications, healthcare, and other sectors, as well as state and local governments, to share threat information to help prevent attacks, and then to provide appropriate incident response to mitigate any potential consequences when attacks do occur. To strengthen our ability to respond to these threats, I've partnered with, as Jane mentioned, Republican Senator Rob Portman on a number of cybersecurity efforts, including the DHS Cyber Incident Response Teams Act. This bipartisan bill, which was signed into law as part of last year's government funding bill, encourages private sector participation to strengthen cybersecurity by leveraging the expertise of both the public and private sectors to help prevent cyber attacks from happening in the first place and to mitigate the impacts when they do happen. I also joined with Senator Portman, as Jane mentioned, on the HtC Act, which was signed into law by the President. HtC established a bug bounty pilot program modeled off similar programs at the Department of Defense and at major tech companies to strengthen cyber defenses at DHS by using so-called white hat or ethical hackers to help identify unique and undiscovered vulnerabilities in the DHS networks and data systems. These bipartisan bills are, of course, just the very first steps we need to take, and we have to continue to develop new strategies to develop and improve our cyber defenses. To further scale up our cyber capabilities, I partnered with Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee Chairman Ron Johnson to allow CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, to issue subpoenas compelling internet service providers to provide information when vulnerabilities are detected on critical infrastructure systems, including industrial control systems. Our bill helps ensure that if CISA finds a vulnerability, it has the tools and information it needs to reach out to the entity maintaining the system. And importantly, the bill is narrowly tailored to protect the privacy rights of all entities, giving CISA only the bare minimum of information necessary to put the target of an attack on notice so that they can prevent the attack altogether. In addition, the Senate recently passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which included a bipartisan amendment I introduced with Senators Portman, Peters, and Cornyn to require DHS to establish a cybersecurity state coordinator position in every state. Under the legislation, each state would have its own federally funded cybersecurity coordinator who would be responsible for helping to prevent and respond to cybersecurity threats by working with federal, state, and local governments, as well as with schools, hospitals, and other entities. Finally, as part of any additional COVID-19 relief package, I've joined my Democratic colleagues in calling for additional cybersecurity funding for state and local governments, for school districts, for small businesses, hospitals, and other essential services and institutions. To further address this issue, next week, the Subcommittee on Federal Spending Oversight and Emergency Management, where I'm the ranking member, will hold a hearing on defending our communities from cyber threats amid COVID-19. Given the increase in cyber threats we've seen throughout this pandemic, additional funding would provide our communities with much needed support to protect themselves from cyber attacks and to help them recover quickly if they are in fact impacted by one. In the days and years to come, we'll continue to face new and challenging threats, but I believe in our capacity as a country to respond to them. It will require that we work together and that we be clear-eyed about the evolving nature of our cybersecurity challenges. I'm committed to doing that and to continuing to work with both Republicans and Democrats on strategies to protect the American people, our businesses, and our economy. So thank you again to Congresswoman Harman and the Wilson Center for hosting this conference and for inviting me to speak with all of you today. Stay safe, and I look forward to a question or two.
Okay, here I am. Yes. It is so refreshing to hear somebody, I mentioned this before as I introduced you, who works on a bipartisan basis to solve problems. I mean, that's, I think, what people should be doing in Congress is adding value. And it's hard to add value if you're just lined up with your team trying to blame the other side. So I salute you, my friend. And I think the things that you have done are very meaningful. Let me just ask you a few questions.
Sure.
One, you mentioned, the ransomware attacks and other attacks on schools and hospitals, very scary, and this is true around the world. You also mentioned, though, that the bills you have gotten passed cover the public sector and the private sector. Are the challenges different between the public sector and the private sector?
Well, I think the challenges are different in some ways in terms of resources that they have and information that they have. But they are both targeted by bad actors here because our enemies know that they can disrupt us either by going after a public entity or a private entity that oversees critical infrastructure, for instance. One of the things that we do know is that as the private sector has developed its own systems to detect attacks and to thwart them, they may have more information about a certain type of attack than the government has spotted, and vice versa. So what's really important here is that we continue working with CISA as our coordinator and kind of intersection point to improve communications between the public and the private sector about what they're seeing. But certainly, in particular, the administrative subpoena bill that Chairman Johnson and I are working on is really critical in that effort, sharing information.
Unmuted. Here I am. Just two more quick questions. On the subpoena power, I think that's an inspired idea, especially a narrowly tailored subpoena, so that you can get the information. And I commend you for that. That's a pending bill, so that hasn't passed yet, right?
Right.
What are the chances for getting that enacted?
Well, it did get into the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, so that's a good step forward.
It is.
That's in the conference process, as I understand it right now. So what people should understand about this is that right now, if there is a critical infrastructure operator, let's say a water system, operated by a private entity, what CISA can see now is that there is an attack being directed at a particular IP address. What they don't know is whose IP address that is. And so right now they are dependent on going to the internet service provider and saying, could you tell whoever's being targeted the following? And sometimes the provider is telling people and sometimes they're not. What this would do is say, give us the power to say to that provider, tell us whose IP address this is, so we can directly communicate to them that they are under threat. And that's really, as we can all think about this, whether it is a water system, a hospital, a school, but in particular when it's a privately operated thing like a water system or a hospital, we really do need that information. And we were very careful. We worked with privacy advocates on it to try to ensure that we just would get the narrow information we need so we can put people on notice.
Sounds good to me, and as I recall, the NDAA usually passes. The rest of the budget, not so much. But you've got it in the right place, and you've got the right sponsorship, and you're obviously a very good legislator, so it's impressive. Last question, you mentioned the cybersecurity coordinator for each state. That's very interesting to me, but my question is, do states want one? And does money come behind it, or is it an unfunded mandate?
Right. So it would be a federally funded coordinator for every state. And certainly when I talk to people in New Hampshire, they are very interested in this because the number of ransomware attacks generally it just has been skyrocketing. Just in about the last year, one of our county systems was attacked. Small county, luckily, one of the employees I think it was a Monday morning, looked at their desktop and said, something's wrong on the screen here. And they had a backup system. They ran a jail, a nursing home, at a dispatch by pencil and paper for a couple of days as they got up and running. Another one was a very small school system up in Sunapee, New Hampshire. Again, they happen to have a very vigilant computer specialist in the school who happened on a Sunday afternoon to be looking at some of the servers, recognized a ransomware attack, and had backed up most of the information on hard drives. But most of these small government actors don't have the resources they need to really build significant systems that would match what the federal government already has in place. And the exciting thing here about a coordinator is that they would help state and locals connect to each other, but they would bring the expertise of the federal government in terms of preventing these kinds of attacks and also building resiliency after an attack. So most of the folks from states that I've talked to are very eager, especially because the position would come funded by the federal government.
New Hampshire is obviously enlightened, and it has a long history of Maggie Hassan, which I think is a win-win for New Hampshire. Now, I also think that Lake Sunapee is absolutely gorgeous, so it's nice to hear that name. But more seriously, if you can get the rest of the country to be enthusiastic about this, and you can make the reforms you're talking about, I think that takes us a long way forward on cybersecurity. And on Hack the Capitol Day, it's important to salute the effort that we're all undertaking, but it's really important, I'll say it, to salute a senator who gets it. So I want to thank you, Maggie, so much for doing this. And it means a lot to me and the Wilson Center.
Well, thank you. And I so appreciate being included. I appreciate what the Wilson Center does and what all the people who are participating today do. You know, part of the challenge before us is helping the American public understand that cyber attacks are just as serious as any other kind of threat the country faces. And I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and with all of you to make us safer. So with that, thank you for including me. Be safe, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for the senator, and again, thank you, Jane, for all of your support through the Wilson Center and everything that you do to help make this a successful for the third year in a row for Hack the Capitol.
Well, could I say one more thing? Let me just see if I can unmute. Am I muted, or can everyone hear?
You are unmuted.
I am unmuted. Imagine. I just want to thank the team at the Wilson Center. That is the team that's really doing this. I'm just a digital adapter who has been schooled and finally getting up to speed after 3 years. But Meg King, who directs our science, technology, and innovation program, and her team are amazing. And it is a labor of love for them. And we're really happy to work with you and to make this a huge success. And obviously, Senator Hassan is a star, and I know we're having another senator. And kudos to you for partnering on this event and for all that you do to keep our country as safe as it can be in light of all the threats we have. Thank you.
Thank you.